It's snowing. Guess what we're gonna do today? Good morning, folks. We're finally getting some moisture out here today. Beautiful snowy day. Love this weather. We definitely need the moisture, that's for sure. So we're gonna get our burn pile going here. Get this thing going. Finally was able to get a burn permit. They haven't been issued them lately because it's been so dry. The secret to starting a burn pile in the snow is get it before it gets too wet, and have one of these. Good propane burner. Get her fired up. This will be going for long. The snow's going to melt down into it, but this fire is going to burn hot enough where it'll evaporate all that off. And this pile should burn pretty good. I got to go in and get a hat because my ears are getting cold. Rolling good now. Brandy's running around the pile waiting for the rabbits to come running out so she can chase something. It won't be long. Beautiful day. It's no longer cold outside. Gotta back up. It's getting warm out here. I tell you, the nice thing about Nebraska is you can actually burn. When we lived out in California, you could not burn unless you had an agricultural operation, and it had to be a fairly sizable one before they would issue you a burn permit. And there was only certain days that you could burn, and you could not burn any ornamental wood, like ornamental trees. You could not burn any shrubberies. You couldn't burn any lumber, nothing like that. So many restrictions. We had a 1 acre farm before we moved, and we had a lot of tree trimmings and stuff like that, and we were not allowed to burn. We had to pay lots and lots of money to be able to dump that stuff. And luckily, one of my buddies had an agricultural operation where we used to be able to take some stuff and burn it over there. But here, you do have to have a burn permit, but they're easy to get as long as it's not dry. We haven't been able to get one lately, but with the snow we have today, they are issuing the permit as long as we do it safely. And if it dries up within the next few days, we have to bring the garden hose over and put the embers out, because if the wind comes up on a dry day, you can still see we have standing dead grass out here that will dry up fairly quickly. And if the wind blows, it'll blow the embers from this fire right over into that dry grass again. So it's supposed to be 60 degrees again by Sunday. So if things dry up, like I said, we'll pull the hose over here and put these embers dead out. But it should be mostly gone by then. Now, getting the burn permit here in this small little town, normally you would just go to the firehouse. But today, you just go down to wherever the fire chief is working. He works at a local business, but he was out of town, so I had to go see the number 2 fire chief guy, and we're at his place of work, and he issued me a burn permit right from there. Super easy to get, like I said, and all you got to do is when you get home and get ready to start the fire, you just call dispatch and let them know that you're starting a fire in case they get any phone calls. They know your address and where you're burning, so they don't send fire trucks out by mistake. But this fire we've been needing to do for probably 6 or 8 months. This stuff's been stacking up, and I hate to have this big mess out here. We like to keep it all cleaned up and keep this mowed down back here. But it's nice and warm right now. We've got some pretty big material in that, so this is going to take a while to burn down. And then once this burns down flat, we'll come out here with a pitchfork and just keep throwing stuff in from the outsides. But all this snow around this pile is going to melt. We'll show you later. But so far, so good. Now, if you've never burnt a pile before and you recently moved into the rural areas, make sure you're following your local fire codes and all the rules in your area. If you want the fire to burn nice and hot, you start it on the upwind side of the pile like we did. But if you don't want it to burn super fast and hot, say, you know, you don't have snow on the ground or something like that, and you want it to burn slower, you would obviously start it on the downwind side, and it would burn slowly upwind and not get as crazy. Right now we're probably 40 feet away from this pile, and it's almost too warm to stand here. You want to make sure you have very good clearance. We've got great clearance out here all the way around this pile. You don't want to be too close to any structures or anything like that, because the radiant heat off of these piles, if they get really hot, can actually start fires on stuff that's close by. Most of the time, like on your house fires, when you see the neighbor's house is catching on fire, if there's a house, say there's a house burning and neighboring structures catch on fire, that's due to the crazy radiant heat that comes off of the fires. I don't think there was a rabbit in there, pup. I think you'd have seen him by now. Make sure you don't get too close to that fire. Boy, I couldn't be more happy about getting this moisture. We needed it so bad, even though there's not as much moisture in snow. 12 inches of snow only yields 1 inch of moisture, or an inch of rain. That's what it's equal to. See, the garden, we'll be doing some spring cleaning in the garden here pretty quick. Fire's burning nice and hot. Fire's burning so hot it's already melted the snow like 15 feet out from the edge of the fire. It'll get that way all around this thing later on. But going well. Now it's very important that you have the proper conditions to burn, like we talked about earlier, because this fire right now is so hot you couldn't put this out with a garden hose. If you squirted a garden hose on this thing, it would evaporate the water out as fast as you'd spray it in there. So you wouldn't be able to touch it with a garden hose, so don't think that you could control something like this with one. That's why it's super important that you're as safe as you can be with this. Brandy's out here trying to catch embers. Kind of like chasing cars, Brandy. What are you going to do if you catch one? Silly dog. Crazy. And we're happy to tell you that no animals were harmed in the making of this burn pile. There's usually rabbits running in and out of there, but no rabbit came out, so the rabbit must be already out doing stuff. And we're not completely destroying the rabbit's habitat. You can see in the shelter belt over there, there's plenty of places where there can be cover over there for the rabbits that they can use. They don't have to use this area here. Well, there's nothing like out here being nice and warm on a snowy day like this. Pretty neat being able to stand out here in the cold and not be cold. They say the best entertainment on a homestead is either a bonfire or bug zapper. I've always liked sitting by fires. It's going to be late this afternoon before we can even get close enough to that thing to throw some of this outside stuff in on top. Because it's going to be way too hot to get even close to that. So we'll bring you back this afternoon when most of this is burnt down. You can see some of that bigger materials from last year. So it's nice and dry. It's going to burn down to nothing. And some of these larger logs like this you see out here, that's from that tree we just cut down last week. That's not going to burn down all the way, I do not believe. So once this fire is good and out, we'll pull those big logs out and we'll set them out of the way, like up by the fence line or over in the corner, so they're not down here in the way. And we'll throw them on next year's burn pile. Now, as of just a couple weeks ago, we're still having wildfires out here in Nebraska in the dead of winter. And yes, it's cold. There was one wildfire that burnt about 2,000 acres when it was below freezing out here. And I can remember fighting wildland fires out in California. I was a volunteer fireman, retired out as a captain in the fire service. We used to fight wildfires in the summer in California, 100-degree weather, and you can imagine wearing the firefighter turnouts, as we call them. We had wildland gear that was a little thinner than the structure turnouts, but it was still hot as blazes, and you'd be sweating like crazy out there in the heat. So I would much rather fight a wildland fire below freezing. I'm sure all my California firefighter friends would agree, but you still want to do what you can to not start one, of course. Now, when I was little, my neighbors had an almond orchard. We call them almond orchards, and they had burnt a bunch of their prunings from their tree. They always have big brush piles that they burn. It was like 2 weeks later, and we always ran around barefooted most of the time, and we were walking around that burn pile, the old burn pile, and the ashes, the fluffy ashes felt really good on the feet. They were pretty cool, felt kind of neat. So we were jumping around in that brush pile, and like I said, it had been like 2 weeks since it had burned. Well, when I got out in the middle of that brush pile stomping around in those fluffy ashes, the inside of that pile was still had red hot embers 2 weeks later, because it's so well insulated down in there underneath all that ash. And I learned the hard way that you don't go stomping through a burn pile after it's burnt. That stuff can stay hot for a long time. And like we mentioned before, if it starts warming up, we'll have to get the water hose out here and put those embers completely out. We probably put a sprinkler out here and just let it run for a while to make sure that's good and dead out. Because if the wind comes up and this stuff dries out, we don't want the chance of burning all the neighbors' pasture out here. This is all food for their cattle. And if we burn all that food for their cattle, that's going to get real expensive. Our insurance would cover it, but they might drop us or raise our rates. So we don't want to do that. We'll see you in a bit. All right, we've done all we can with the brush crusher, and then I've came back with the pitchfork and scooped all the stuff that I could get close enough to scoop in. It's still pretty darn hot, so we'll come back just before dark and scoop in the rest of what we can scoop in. These 3 big logs on top are from that tree we just did last week, so we'll burn up whatever will burn on those, and then we'll set those aside. Now, you noticed we were using the tractor getting in real close to that pile. If you've never used a tractor to push a burn pile before, use the brush that you have in the grapple to shield the front of your tractor as you get close to the fire, and always come in on the cold side of the fire. A lot of these tractors got plastic hoods and stuff on them now. You don't want to be deforming those things. And don't get your tires down into the embers. You'll burn your tires up. But we can do the rest of this with a pitchfork real easy. All right, we got the brush crusher taken off. We put our bucket back on with our edge tamers in case we get enough snow where we need to push snow. We are ready to go. We got the tractor backed in so we can push our way out if necessary. We've also cleaned out around our doors. You learned real early that you don't want to let snow accumulate on the bottom of your door and then let it freeze, because then you'll never get your door open. So that's the first thing we do, is we clear these doors out. We've already got a couple inches of snow out here. It's supposed to snow the rest of the day and on into tomorrow, so we actually may be pushing snow. If we get all day accumulation, we'll probably come out tonight and do a preliminary push in case we get a large accumulation over the night. There's not so much snow, and we don't clear the whole yard out. We just do a lane to go out to the road. That way we don't get humongous piles of snow that take forever to melt in the spring. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our little pyro project we did today. Always satisfying burning a pile like that, just like sitting by a campfire. Good cheap entertainment. But we're going to go inside and get us some of that beef stew out of the root cellar and warm that up. And if you didn't see that video, I'll link it right up here where you can see where we can that beef stew ready-made meal. So until next time, folks, we hope you stay safe, stay healthy. We love you guys. We'll give you a little shot of out here over the prairie out here. Beautiful day. I know you're not supposed to fly your American flag in the storm, but these colors don't run around here. We'll buy a new flag if that one goes bad. Catch you later.